I was in a startup environment where I could do this and this and this and that, and like creativity started to like run on fire. And then at that point I was like, okay, it's inevitable, it's in my veins, it's in my blood, I cannot escape it, I cannot stay in the corporate environment, and I will always be my dad's and my grandpa and my great grandpa's daughter, and I will always be an entrepreneur. For every entrepreneur, there's probably a time where your personal life is doing really not great, and then your work is doing amazing, and that's sometimes a very big tear because you kind of have to put that brave face, and it's not even a brave face because I am really genuinely incredibly happy about everything that's going on.
On today's episode, Roni GamZon, co-founder of BioFluff, Gen Z consultant, and circularity advocate. Roni, thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course, I'm so happy to be here.
Guys, for everyone listening, today we have Roni GamZon with us, a fourth-generation entrepreneur from Israel, now living in Paris. At the young age of 23, she's the co-founder and chief commercial officer of BioFluff, a truly innovative venture that offers the world's first plant-based fur alternative, as well as being a Gen Z consumer trend consultant to large corporations. With a mission to blend sustainability with her passion to luxury fashion, Roni is an industry changemaker whose journey I'll be curiously following. Welcome, Roni.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, can you share how your rich familial lineage of entrepreneurship and engineering has shaped your journey?
Yes, absolutely. So, I grew up in a household where my dad had startups and opened, closed, sold companies throughout my life. And not only my dad, but also my grandpa. So actually, when I signed up for school, I went to IDC. It's Israel's top private university. That's very entrepreneurial focused. It's kind of like the Stanford of Israel. When I signed up for school, I had to choose between computer science and entrepreneurship. And I straight up chose computer science. I was like, I do not want to be my dad.
Why?
I said, like, I want to be in that nice corporate space, having my amazing salary, my safe job. I don't want to like take risks and raise money and close companies and sell them. I was like, it's not for me. Let me just be in my nice little like corporate bubble.
Was it stressful? Like, did you perceive stress from your dad as you saw him work?
Yeah, I think so. Some, but also I've always been kind of a person that loves brands. So I love the brand title of, like
working for someone,
a unicorn, a name. I've loved brands and fashion. Like I've always been a brand person. So then when I went to work, my first job, I went to SimilarWeb, which is an Israeli unicorn. And there I was very randomly placed in a team where we were 7 people in charge of a startup that they bought. So I actually got into a startup.
Wow.
Right?
Manifested.
Like
okay.
7 people in charge of 3 million users, all Gen Z. And I was like, okay, I have my nice salary, I have my nice like safety of a corporate environment, I'm happy. And then because my team didn't understand the consumer segment of Gen Z, and they were like, oh, what's TikTok? What's Roblox? So from being like doing automated testing software, I became a product manager, creative director, doing design, doing
That's at
sales,
what age?
marketing. That was at age 21.
Okay.
And I started to get that like entrepreneurial bug, right? Because I was in a startup environment where I could do this and this and this and that. And like my creativity started to like run on fire. And then at that point I was like, okay, it's inevitable. It's in my veins. It's in my blood. I cannot escape it. I cannot stay in the corporate environment. And I will always be my dad's and my grandpa and my great grandpa's daughter. And I will always be an entrepreneur.
So tell me a little bit more about what inspired you, maybe about your dad and your granddad. What is that strong pull that in the end, put you?
Yeah, absolutely. So my great grandfather he was actually based in Paris. He was French, and he was an electrical engineer, and he started a youth movement for Jews all around France, because when he wanted to apply for youth movements, they wouldn't let him be there because he was Jewish, and it was the starting of World War II. And then during the war, he had this like giant pool of community of Jews. So then he used this movement to start helping Jews, like the women, the children, escape, and use the power they had as young, strong men to fight with the resistance. And it's a beautiful story. And up until today, when I'm back in Paris, you know, I closed that loop. People know my family, Jewish people in France hear my family name and they're like, oh my God, do you know what your grandpa did? And so that has always inspired me, because I've met French Jewish people throughout my life that have like grown up in that youth movement, which is existing until today, and grew up around the values of inclusivity, diversity. He really believed that everyone, no matter how religious, how not religious, where they come from, what is their ethnicity, should be all together.
Hi everyone, today's episode is sponsored by Momo Kombucha, my favorite non-alcoholic drink together with water. I've now been drinking Momo Kombucha for around 6 months, and I really love their product because they're healthy, they're delicious, they keep coming out with these new flavors and limited editions. Watermelon that I tried recently that I was obsessed with. So if you want to try Momo Kombucha and you haven't yet, feel free to use the discount code ISTHISIT15 to get a 15% discount off your first order.
And I saw that impact that gave, right? Like almost 100 years later, it still exists so strongly. It's absolutely insane. So, and then he moved back to Israel, and actually, he moved to Israel to build Israel, and that's where my grandfather and my father was born. And then I circled back and went to Paris, which is funny. But he also used his like engineering mindset when he was fighting at the World War. And he was an electrical engineer, so he would create bombs and bomb Nazi trains.
Whoa.
It's insane. And he got a Medal of Honor from Charles de Gaulle himself. And then my grandpa, he was an aerospace engineer, and he was one of the first people to bring drones to the Israeli Air Force. And after he got out of the Air Force after 20 years of being there, he opened a startup before startups were even a thing. He got an investment from one of the biggest like entrepreneurs in Israel. His name is Efi Arazi, which is actually the name of my computer science school. My computer science college is called Efi Arazi Computer Science College. Wow. He's my granddad's first investor. And then my grandpa invented a drone that was then sold to the Israeli Air Force, and he just kind of like, throughout his retirement, even when I was growing up, he was 60 and 70 and he was still involved in startups. And I would come, every once in a while he would be like in a Friday night dinner, like, oh yeah, I've created like a new startup, or I'm working now on a new engine for a fully electrical helicopter. Like, oh cool, grandpa, yeah, like legit Rick or Morty.
Yeah.
And then my dad, really, I think he raised the first venture capital money right when I was born, from like one of the first VCs in Israel. Their name is, I forgot, Pitango. Their name is Pitango, which is one of the still most established VCs in Israel. And he created, also in the most security cyberspace, he created a company that does control and command systems for big software. So they did also the Iron Dome system, which today is one of the most active systems during our time, and a bunch of other amazing projects, smart cities, electricities, all kinds of incredible things. But yeah, I was growing up and I saw him kind of like, open that company, prosper it, grow it to 200 employees, then leave it because he wanted to create another startup, raise for that startup, close that startup right before COVID because it wasn't working out, which really taught me also the importance of knowing that it is okay to fail, and it's okay that if it doesn't work out. And this is things that really took me a while to kind of see. Only looking back at it, I know how inspiring that was, and how inspiring it is to see that each of the three projects and startups really impact people until today. And I think that is the main inspiration I have from them, to do something that would have such longevity and would impact people for a really long time.
That's really, really, really inspirational. And I think those are also very big shoes to fill. So I'm interested in how did you understand what is that you're calling? What is it that you want to have impact with? And you seem to have this passion for fashion that has really inspired your entrepreneurial journey. So can you tell me, where did that passion come from?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've loved fashion since I was born, basically. I would always wear these crazy outfits and make my mom go with her to the supermarket wearing this huge fur coat and crazy tights, and I would always love to explore dressing up, and it was always my favorite thing. And when I was growing up in Singapore, kind of our after school activity was always to go to the main street of all the shops that was just right next to our school. And I would spend every day around the shops and just seeing the new trends, seeing everything that was going on. But my true love for fashion actually comes from my love for art. And I always knew that I wanted, because I came from computer science, that's what I studied, but I always knew that I want to mix computer science with art. So I thought my directions would be a little bit more like programming for Photoshop or for Canva or Figma, something like that. And that was actually my first job. It was that startup was actually a startup that helps you design and personalize your web interface and your phone interface. So I love that kind of the creative, where creativity meets business and startups. That's really what I loved. And then out of kind of nowhere, I went to Milan, and I met a friend of a friend's who kind of talked to me about the business world of fashion, which in Israel isn't that big. So I never thought about it. And that kind of created that spark where suddenly I got into this world of fashion tech and fashion tech startups. And I completely fell in love with it. That was if I loved art and creativity and business and startups, imagine what it was for fashion. That was completely it was a wow moment. And I love that fashion is such an inspiring world. It's a creative world, but it's a business world. If you look at the richest man today, it's Bernard Arnault, who owns 75 brands. Out of them, the top fashion brands, Vuitton, Dior, Fendi. And it's a business. It's prospering inspiration and creativity into business.
Yeah. And it's very interesting to me that those are mainly all luxury brands.
Yes.
Isn't that really fascinating that the richest man alive owns brands of luxury?
So the thing is that the luxury brands, what makes them so unique is also heritage and the impact and the fact that they're all brands that are timeless.
Of course. No, I come from a background, you might not know this, but I worked for one of the most prestigious watchmaking companies for many years. And before that, I worked in other luxury companies. So I'm very attuned to the luxury world and I really love it. I love the story. I love the history. I love the savoir-faire. I love the exclusivity. I love the quality. I love the uniqueness.
Exactly.
Trust me.
Exactly. And that's when I kind of, my eyes opened to that world, which I didn't come from. And I guess you didn't either, because Latvia and Israel are not places where it's built in the culture.
No, yeah, not
and
at all.
when you discover it, I completely fell in love with it. Yeah. And then when I kind of rolled from fashion tech to the sustainability side of fashion tech, and how can you use technology and innovation to make the fashion and the luxury industry a more sustainable one, a more circular one, because it's beautiful industries that will always exist. And we just need to help them move into that direction of circularity and of sustainable solutions. And the way to do it is through innovation and technology. And that is kind of where everything came together. And I really found my calling, which is to help the fashion and the luxury world be more sustainable.
Amazing. I already mentioned that you are 23 years old, so very fully belonging to the Gen Z generation. And we mentioned also that you consult big corporations, luxury companies on the Gen Z trends. So as an advisor about those, how do Gen Z consumer behavior differs from the older generations?
Well, Gen Z, first of all, grew into social media, grew up kind of with social media. So we are much more informed consumers. If you tell me that this t-shirt is sustainable, I can look it up. I can look up everything. We're used to having our phones, to being able to share everything, share what we actually think of products, share what we actually think of campaigns online with our friends. So we don't buy bullshit, and we are very, very environmentally aware. This generation has grown into climate change and into the climate crisis. So I think that's like the main thing, is that brands need to start actually taking action into that direction and understanding that it's no longer something that they're gonna do for marketing purposes, because the consumers are very, very smart and they have access to all the information. So they need to find solutions that actually make impact. And that's where all the greenwashing came from, right? Because you could see everything, you can double check that, you can talk about it very, very easily. So before, there used to be brands saying that they're doing things sustainable or inspired by nature or things that are natural, and then today you can't do that because the consumer would know in a second. But it is something that's very important to the consumers.
How does one find out? Is it always available, this data that you can verify? Say someone says, oh, all of our materials are naturally sourced.
Yeah. So today there's also a lot of it. There's a big revolution in regulations. So you can't anymore just claim things, just say whatever. But I mean, I think it differs, right? If you're talking about material, at the end you have very, very strict standards of what you can say on the label, what you cannot. So you can tell me that this is natural, but I'll look on the label and see that there's polyester in it, right? How
about those cases, because I hear this quite often, where they say made in Italy, and in the end, like one button was made in Italy.
So also that there's regulations around that. Everything that's being said now is going to be a lot more strict, and there's going to be carbon taxes as well. So it would cost brands a lot to produce something, where the button is there, the garment is there, it's being sewn together there, the textile is made there. So you would have to, first of all, communicate on where was it made in each step, and who are the manufacturers. There's going to be really digital passports for every item. So you're going to know where the stitching came from, where it was sewn together, where the material came from, where the farmers that grew the raw material for the textile you're using. There's going to be a big, big revolution over the next few years.
I like that. I like to hear that. More transparency, and I guess in the end, a little bit more possibility to rely on what people are actually saying without having to triple check it.
Exactly.
Because that's going to be enforced.
Exactly.
So how do you think Gen Z is impacting and going to keep impacting the fashion industry?
Well, Gen Z is really pressuring both the transparency and honesty, as I mentioned, but then also a different kind of consumer mindset. So much more ethically, environmentally aware. And that really impacts the way that the fashion industry is going to make products and market them. The only problem is that today, Gen Z does not have the money yet, especially when we're talking about luxury. And, even I don't have, but they still buy things that are kind of on the cheaper end and can't afford things that are much higher in price, but are natural, but are better alternatives, made more ethically. And that's a big problem with this consumer mindset. And it's a big problem for the brands because they still don't have that indication that people are willing to pay more for things that are more ethically and environmentally better sourced.
Can I ask a question here?
Yeah, of course.
So as we know, for all these luxury brands, the margins are insanely high. So my question is, when we talk about swapping, for example, a traditionally made product for one that is ethically sourced and made, by increasing that price for the consumer, shouldn't there be a possibility where we can simply at least keep it the same or even reduce it via lowering the margin rather than passing it on to the consumer?
I mean, that's kind of what should be happening. The brands should be subsidizing this alternative swap. But, as someone that's working on replacing fur and plastic faux fur with a natural alternative that isn't actually that much more expensive than plastic faux fur, and it's already less expensive than animal fur.
Great.
So what's the problem, right? Like, why isn't it on everything? The brands still are very afraid of making changes. And at the end of the process, you have the merchandisers, which are the ones saying, okay, this product is going to be costing this much. That's how much the margins. And you have the buyers, the people that, Selfridges has their buyers that are going to buy the product and sell them. And the stores themselves, they have the buyers. And that segment, the merchandising and the buyers, has not yet made a shift. So if they see that it's more expensive, they don't like it.
Yeah.
That's a big problem. But then on the other hand, it's not only the price point. There is some aspect of price point because for a lot of the materials, for example, the price parity is still not there. It's much more expensive. There are brands that are kind of investing in that and they would pay more and just kind of look at it as an investment. So Ghani is a really, really great example for a brand like that. They take on materials or technologies that are costing them more than what they're used to on normal products, but then they want to release it at the market at the same price for the consumer. They understand it's an investment because at the end of the day, the company they're kind of working with is a startup, and as much as there's more demand, they can produce more, they can scale more, and of course the price will decrease.
Tell me a little bit more about BioFluff. So obviously that's the company that you co-founded, that you're working in. Tell me more about the product itself. So it's biological, natural, fiber, provenance, fur. Sorry, I butchered that.
Yeah. So it's plant-based fur. So basically today, and it's not just fur, we have shearling, all kind of like velvety materials. Basically, we want to replace all the fluffy materials. You call it performance materials, but all the fluffy materials you see in the world today are either from animal fur, which is when you really kill the animal, skin it for the fur. Animal fibers, which is shearling, where you shear the sheep.
Just a tiny side question. So the animals that are used for fur and leather, are they specifically grown and killed for that, or are they by...
For fur, yes. For leather, not. Okay. Leather cows are being grown for food, and then you take the skin. Then you have shearling, which is kind of like animal fibers. So you're still shearing the animal, it comes from animals, but you don't kill the animal for it.
That should be fine, right?
Depends. I mean, you're still kind of using animals, and you're still growing the animals for this, and eventually, they get killed. It's better than using,
because I've seen the photos when the sheep overgrow with the fur, it's not good for them as well. They become these huge bubbles of clouds of fur.
Right, but they're still, you're growing animals to use in the fashion or the materials industry, and that creates pollution. Animals create pollution, so it's not something that should be the optimal solution. And sometimes, there are ethically sourced and like ethically sheared sheeps and stuff like that, but sometimes the whole like shearing of them really is brutal, or how they're grown.
I see.
So it's not a great alternative. And then there's the plastics. So most of the fluffy materials you see today, whether it's in fashion, interior design, children's toys, are all plastic.
Faux fur. And
think about it, that fur and the fluffy materials, they shed plastic to our water, to our environment. And the whole process of making it uses a lot of chemicals. So that's actually, when you start thinking about it, go out to the street and start seeing how much like fluffy fur, toys, interior design things you see, and think about the fact that it's all plastic. It's all plastic that sheds. So it's a huge topic that nobody was kind of covering. And my co-founder, Martin, and he's our CEO, he came from the alternative leather industry. He's a biochemical engineer, and he was one of the first engineers for MycoWorks, which is the first company doing mushroom leather. And over COVID, he was stuck in a tannery in Spain for R&D, and he couldn't go back to the States because of COVID. And in that tannery, he saw animals being processed for leather, but then for fur as well. And Martin has been a vegetarian for the past 20 years. Wow. He loves animals.
How old?
He's 32. Okay. And he just saw the animals being processed, and he thought, how can there not be a different solution? So he spent COVID, kind of like how I like to say it, playing with plants in his room.
Okay.
And basically he came up with the solution we use today, which is we take agricultural waste.
Such as?
We cannot disclose, but basically the plants we use are not even being grown to use for our purposes. You can imagine they're being grown for the fruit, and we take the leaves.
Okay.
It's
amazing.
A byproduct. And it's something that's very widely available. So we don't need to, it's not scarce. It's not expensive. It's not expensive. We can scale it very easily. And then with that, we treat the fibers. We use all kinds of, a combination of both science and solutions that were already in the industry, and generational family factories in Italy that we're so happy to finally have some, a business increase, because everything was kind of decreasing with animal fur, kind of the industry dying. They're really their workload has been going down a lot. And when Martin came up to them with this amazing new solution that brings such a big business opportunity, they've been so happy. It's really like 4th generation factories where the kids are working there and with their parents, and the grandparents are kind of around. It's
the
beautiful.
Italian way, beautiful.
Yeah, very Italian. And yeah, so this is how we came up with BioFluff, and it's just a completely plant fiber fur, and it's biodegradable. We don't use any chemicals or any.
I was gonna ask that.
Yeah, there's no chemicals, there's no like plastic coatings on it or anything. And really the ambition was to create something that is completely natural and that would replace all those fluffy materials out there in a way that doesn't say, okay, these materials cannot exist. Mm-hmm. People love fluff, they love fur, because it reminds you of animals, it reminds you of nature. It's something you see in nature. Mm-hmm. It's not like leather, you don't really see it, right? You see furry animals, you have your dog, it's something that's really fun for fashion and for materials generally. But so it shouldn't not exist. It should just be a better alternative that is derived from nature. Like we like to say, in partnership with nature. Nice.
That's really, really nice. Is BioFluff the only product in the market that does plant-based fur?
Yes.
Yeah, incredible. Congratulations.
It's honestly, it's quite crazy.
Hence why you can't disclose that ingredient. No worries.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna make it competitive.
We are going to disclose very soon.
Okay.
Kind of what fibers we use, but just not right now.
Not right now.
Okay. Obviously, we want the transparency to consumers, but just because we are patent pending, we're the only ones in the market.
Of course.
We're very careful on what we say and what we don't say. But it's incredible. Really, the only other kind of two developments that's been around is one called EcoPel, which we use like 30%. The only other developments up until now have been kind of 30% plant-based. And I say plant-based because it's usually from cornstarch, which is not great because you're using a plant that is supposed to be for food. You're using it for fashion. And the rest is polyester. So you're not really solving that whole shedding problem and the whole biodegradability aspect.
Roni, if I asked you, what is your purpose?
In life, I want to make the fashion industry and the luxury industry as inspiring and creative as it is, but in a way that not only celebrates nature, which it is, like luxury and fashion celebrate nature a lot of the time, but also works with it and in partnerships with it, and is not the third most polluting industry in the world, but is actually the most innovative, like the place where things are being tested out. Even if you look at our product, Martin, my co-founder, he did not come from fashion. He does not like fashion. We go to meetings or I tell him about like a new brand I talk to and he's like, who's that? And this is at the level of like,
what's Dior?
Yeah, what's Dior? What's Prada? Mew what? Like that. But and
a lot of funny names in fashion.
Yeah, but there's so many of these innovators that I know today that are scientists that made amazing materials, and their first entry point is the fashion world. It's the luxury world, which is incredible. It's so fun. And this is something that should be so celebrated about this industry, right? And it's not really being talked about, and the industry is still very conservative around innovation. So really, that's like my purpose, is to drive that change.
I love that. I love that because it really is one of the most polluting industries of all, but it brings people so much joy.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be that way. And I'm really glad to see, the young generation like yourself that isn't afraid to tackle the status quo and the existing solutions to find some better ones.
Exactly. And I think it's about being solution-oriented and seeing how inspiring this all can be. Because a lot of the times, especially the creatives in the industry, they kind of feel like sustainability is something scary and like, oh, you shouldn't be using leather anymore. You shouldn't be doing this anymore. It's like banning and kind of, restricting them. But it shouldn't be like that. You know, last week, the European Union banned sparkles. So you're not gonna have sparkles anymore because they're all microplastic, just shedding everywhere, right? But it shouldn't be, okay, like, we're gonna live in a sparkleless world, because that's not the case. I'm not going to live in a world without sparkles, right?
That's not the purpose.
But there are companies doing sparkles completely made out of plants. How beautiful is that? Would you rather put little pieces of plastic on your face and on your body? Or would you rather put plants that have been manipulated to create sparkles? What is more cool? What is more inspiring? And that's kind of the real big shift I'm trying to work on, and in the minds of the creatives, that sustainability is not, and circularity is not something that should be scary and restricting and boring. It's something that could actually be super inspiring and creative. And they're always kind of inspired by nature. You know, if you go to a store,
everything is coming from nature.
Everything is coming from nature. And for example, it was very, very clear to me when I went to the Bottega Veneta store in Paris. They just reopened, like redesigned. And we came in. I took my co-founder Martin because I wanted to give him the experience of a luxury store. It was a very interesting experience. But we come in and, you know, the salesman is talking to us about how Matthew Blasey, the creative director, is super inspired by nature. And you can see that the jackets are all like, you know, inspired by fish, and the floor is inspired by the ocean, and there's so much wood all around. There's like, it's really, you can see how he draws his inspiration from nature. So imagine if he could actually work with nature to create his amazing creations.
That's next level.
That's what I want. That's what gets me up in the morning.
I love that. I love this non-settling for less, not settling for anything less than your vision and what you think is right and what you think it could be. Because this is something that I often talk about with my coaching clients as well, is we have this idea in our mind based on things that have been in the past. We have this idea of how things should be, how things are gonna keep going, because that's our only experience. But then it's about asking better questions. And the question is, how can I make this work in a way that I'm happy, it aligns with my values, I can make it work, and it brings me towards my vision?
Exactly.
Because it can happen.
It can
You just
happen.
need to ask that right question.
It's about finding your personal passion. I could not be kind of, you know, getting up in the morning and going to sleep every night super late, going to like traveling all over. You know, it's not, being an entrepreneur is really not easy. But I could not be doing it if I didn't love what I was doing. And that kind of the mix between impact and fashion is so fun. You know, like I when I go to a brand, which is my favorite, like, okay, I want to tell you a story. My first paycheck from when I was working at SimilarWeb, the first time I made money, you know, like my own kind of money, I spent it on a bag of my favorite brand, like my dream bag. I bought it from Vestiaire Collective, of course, because I'm Gen Z and we buy secondhand, and it was like the most sustainable I could do at the moment, and price parity was great. But I bought that dream bag, and then yesterday I had my first meeting with that brand, and it's just mind-blowing. Like, I'm so excited, you know, like I'm talking to them and they're inviting me to their HQ, like where the magic happens.
Dream come true.
It's a dream come true. And I'm not there, you know, to sell them to make more plastic or to use more data, which is fine. It's all great. Like, the innovation is great, but I'm there to help them make their creations more sustainable and more responsible. How fun could that be?
Beautiful. It's very nice to hear somebody living their dream. And that's also the reason why I'm having the podcast, is because I want to hear from and get inspired myself, and hopefully the audience as well, from people that have found that it. Like, is this it for you? Sounds like it is definitely it for you.
It's definitely it for me.
And it's very inspiring to observe and hear about that and learn how that journey came about. So BioFluff has garnered significant investment and is set to feature in COP28. Can you share the journey and milestones you aim to achieve in this event?
Yes. So basically, we were chosen by Stella McCartney to showcase with her at COP28. She's doing in the green zone, where it's open to the public, but the public that is going to be there is heads of states and heads of sustainability of like Google and Meta and crazy world leaders in the sustainability space. And basically LVMH wanted to showcase their vision for sustainability and for future innovations. And Stella McCartney is curating that and showcasing 12 innovators at COP28. And we are one of the innovators she selected, which is super, super exciting. We are the youngest company there. We are a team of 4 people, right? Which is incredible. And we've only raised 3 million up until now, which is significantly a small amount rather than other people showcasing there. But it's absolutely an incredible opportunity. Stella is making the first ever coat with BioFluff, which we are also, by the way, rebranding. So by the time this episode will launch, it's not going to be called BioFluff. Yeah,
okay.
But I can't say it because it's not final
Just send
yet.
it to me when it's out.
Yeah, exactly. She's making the first ever coat, and Stella has always been really inspired by nature and has a very big love for animals. She's never used anything that is made from animals. Okay. So not leather, not animal fur. Ever. It's incredible. Since she started the brand, she hasn't used animal leather. Absolutely incredible. Before there were even, like better alternatives. So she just found, some plastic alternatives at the beginning until came the non-plastic plant-based materials. So this is the first time she's using an alternative to fur that is not from plastic, which is so exciting. And yeah, that's the collaboration we're doing.
I love that. And I'll be looking out for when that comes out. So the journey from ideation to establishing of BioFluff happened in the heart of Paris.
Not really, no. So it happened. So I told you, Martin was in the Tenerife in Spain, being stuck there, and kind of came up with the idea and started coming up with the science behind it. And then he lives in California, and he somehow found Steven, our third co-founder and COO, who Steven has been in the industry for the past 40 years. He has built the biggest cotton recycling plant in North America. This guy is like incredible.
OG.
He really knows how to take things to the industrial level. And that was something that was very important to Martin when he was creating the solution, is to make something that from day one could be industrial and could be scalable. Because in his past company, they really came up with everything from zero. So that requires machineries, that requires a factory. They grow their own raw material. So that requires a lot of investment and a really long time, which is a lot of the time could kill a startup on the way, right? So that's how Martin and Steven came together to create a product that is between scientific innovation to industrial innovation, using existing solutions in the industry and in different industries actually. And then Martin signed up to the LVMH Innovation Award. actually without knowing what LVMH is. And he signed up for it because he wanted to get his visa for the US. So you need to kind of have like articles written about you. So he signed up for any innovation award he could find, which was LVMH as well. So he signed up not knowing what Dior was, not knowing what Vuitton is. And no, I'm exaggerating it a little bit. He did kind of know, but not really. And he signed up, won the sustainability category, and that then they showcased that at a conference called Vivatech, which is France's like top innovation conference, happening once a year, and is in collaboration with LVMH, where they showcase their new cohort for innovation every year. And I kind of randomly came to that conference. I didn't know kind of how incredible it was and how the heart of fashion innovation is in Paris, and is like, that is the main event for in the year. So I came not knowing what to expect, and it was just at my beginning of getting into the fashion innovation space. And I asked who was the youngest company there, because I was super interested to see what was the youngest innovation there, thinking that I would want to create, my own company. And they said, oh, that guy. So I go up to him, we talk.
No way.
Yeah, and he was just there alone with his little like vest and man bun and like just not knowing, like what the fashion world is. And we started talking. It was so interesting. And yeah, and then we kind of like just stayed in touch for a while while he was developing the product. And then at one point, like 6 months later, we had a catch up, and he told me he's starting to raise. He needs someone to be in Paris, to go to the brands, to get like letters of intent for the investment. And I said, you know what? I could, I consult to companies. I can consult to your company and do that. And just like, we wanted letters of intent, and that became collaborations, that became prototyping, that became so much interest and so much work. And I got to really do that, what I love, which is bridging the innovation world with the fashion world, that I eventually joined in as a full-time co-founder to the company.
Love that. Love that. Can you share with me one of the most challenging moments in your entrepreneurial journey so far?
I think, okay, I'll split that to two. There's the most challenging, I think, moment at BioFluff, and then there's in my entrepreneurial journey. I think, yeah, so actually the most difficult moment in my entrepreneurial journey is the past few weeks, because I am from Israel and I live in Paris. And the past few weeks, as you know, have been really difficult time in Israel, and is very controversial. Although I don't see it as there's much controversy. Most people all want, peace and not civilians to be killed. And we want peace between Palestine and Israel, but it's not a war right now between Palestine and Israel. It's about a terror organization, right? But I mean, it's a whole other topic. But the past few weeks, my family is there. My best friends are at the age where they're in the military, they're fighting. And I kind of have to go back to 100 years ago, where my great-grandfather was walking around Paris feeling, starting to feel like he can't disclose the fact that he's Jewish, can't be proud of his Jewish heritage. That's literally what's happening right now. I go around Paris, I don't speak Hebrew anymore. I don't say my actual name. I don't say where I came from, because I don't know how people are going to treat that. And it's starting to become scary. So that's kind of something that's happening in my personal world, let's say. But then in my company, things are going crazy, right? Like we're preparing for COP28, we're making a huge difference, we're doing a launch, we just closed our financing round. Like everything is super exciting and fun, and that is a really big tear into realities. And that's my two realities right now. And it took me around the first week to understand that this is going to also be my two realities for a really long time. So, you know, being with people and in meetings and kind of having those really high energies from the fact that I'm super inspired and passionate about everything I do, but then kind of having that tear in my personal life and like being so far from what's going on, being physically far, wanting to go back to home, but being afraid that if I go back now, you know, I might miss COP, I might. Yeah. So it's been really, really difficult. And I think if you kind of translate it to something a little bit more global, for every entrepreneur, there's probably a time where your personal life is doing really not great, and then your work is doing amazing, and that's sometimes a very big tear because you kind of have to put that brave face, and it's not even a brave face because I'm really genuinely incredibly happy about everything that's going on, but it's just like a huge roller coaster at the moment.
I can imagine, and thank you so much for sharing that. I didn't want to proactively ask you anything about, you know, your experience or your stance, because I want to make sure that I don't create any more divide in maybe the listeners or the watchers, because that's never the intention. You know, I understand right. That's a very sensitive subject for, you know, a lot of the world right now.
I think it's about coming together rather than dividing. And I have friends that are, you know, in Paris, I have friends that are Lebanese and Syrian and from Iran and from really like all over. And they have families that are in Palestine, and nobody wants civilians harmed on any side. And that's why it's crazy that there is a divide, because it's not Palestine versus Israel, right? And we all just want peace, and both sides have been wrong, and I really don't support our government right now. And but it doesn't mean that I want my people or Palestinians to be hurt. I don't want Palestinians to be, you know, trapped somewhere that's bad for them. But the main point is that there's a terror organization that's ruining and killing both sides. So, you know, they're hurting the Palestinians more than they're hurting, you know, more than they are hurting Israel. And that's really why I don't think it's even that much of a controversial, but it is generally the whole conflict in the Middle East is a controversial subject and creates divide. But specifically now, it's not a war. It's not a war between countries. It's a war against terror. And that needs to be very, very clear. And we all kind of need to come together right now. And I wish that we didn't even have to fight this, you know? I wish we could just put all the effort and the money and the resources instead of to fight each other, instead of to fight terror, to fight climate change. That's really, if I had a magic wand, you know, that's Nick's favorite. Nick is a mentor of mine who was in a previous episode, and that's his favorite. It's his favorite phrase. And if I had a magic wand, I would take all the money, all the resource, all the like emotional resource, right? All the hate, all the pain that people and governments and the world is investing right now into uniting, into solving climate change. Yeah. That's what should be done right now.
And saving the planet that we all walk on and
exactly. Because we're right now like ruining each other, ruining the planet. Do you know how much pollution there is from fighter pilots and drones, you know how much that is.
You probably know better than me.
It's crazy pollution. So, and instead of using, it's just crazy. Like, I was talking to a friend who has kids, and she told me that when she told her daughter about this, her daughter said, but mommy, what about the planet? Why aren't they fighting to change the planet and to act against climate change? And yeah, that's my biggest frustration right now.
No, I definitely understand where you're coming from. And thank you so much for being vulnerable, open, and sharing your stance. Thank you.
Thank you.
So on a slightly happier note, I will end with my favorite question, which is, what is your recipe for happiness?
My recipe for happiness, I think it's about really finding your true calling and your true passions and finding a way to act on them every single day. And just understanding that you can kind of create your reality and you can create any kind of reality you want. And that's really what I did with my life. 2 years ago, I was living in Israel studying computer science. And then I decided that I found my true calling, I found my passion, and I completely changed that. And I wanted to come to Paris. I moved to Paris. And you need to realize that you create your own reality and dream as big as you want, and then things will happen.
Don't restrict the dreams.
Exactly.
I love that. Thank you, Roni.
Thank you so much.
Hello friends, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe and share it with someone. I would love to hear your feedback and suggestions as to what guests you would like to see on the show next. See you next week.